gracias. Buenos días. Como foi dito, eu falo português, mas eu preparado to speak English. What I'm going to do is to offer a presentation which is about South African policy in general. I'll touch on, I think, some themes where I think we have quite a lot of common interest as Argentina and South Africa. One of the issues I've raised is our own negotiations with the European Union, and also some of the broad perspectives which we have on the WTO Doha round negotiations. But I want to just start off by saying that what I'm speaking to is a trade policy strategy paper which we adopted earlier towards the end of last year. Basically we are saying as a country that for us the trade policy has got to be linked to our national overall development strategy, in particular our industrial policy. So we see our industrial policy shaping our trade policy, not the other way around. And that when we look at our challenges as South Africa, and I think they're not unique to South Africa, they're the same in other developing countries, we've got a number of key structural challenges which we need to address, and in particular we need to move forward with value-added production. We also need to take account of the fact that there are a number of very important dynamic changes that are taking place in the global economy that requires us to have a strategic integration approach rather than a sort of an unthought approach of integration into the world economy. Now, in South Africa we have deep structural challenges. We have widespread poverty, severe inequalities, all of this inherited from apartheid, continuing high levels of unemployment, which are in the high 20% of our population, that we have, insofar as our economy is growing, there is a tilt towards capital and high skills intensive activities. Our export profile remains dominated by resource intensive and commodity based industries. Those are the challenges that we have to address. And so our industrial and development strategy aims to produce a more broad-based development. And as I said earlier on, the trade policy must support this rather than the other way around. And therefore we have adopted what we call a strategic approach to trade policy. And that we think that our trade policy is intended to shape the terms of our engagement in international trade negotiations, and that one of the key objectives, which you will see I'll come to in a minute, is that we believe that in any trade negotiation we have to make sure that we have policy space to pursue developmental objectives. When we look at the shape of global trade, we see that, the nature of global competition has changed quite dramatically. That comparative advantage is not any longer the only determinant for success. It's not just what resources you may have or may not have. And that we believe that there's been no case in economic history, in fact anywhere in the world I would argue, where a country has actually moved forward and created new value-added activities without making purposeful intervention. And that in order to achieve this, we need to have a strategic collaboration between government and business. So when we look at the patterns of world trade, the fastest growing exports are actually non-resource-based manufacturers, with medium and high-tech goods predominating. A lot of trade is intra-industry, not just across industry. There's the emergence with globalization of global supply chains and manufacturing and services, and that we're noticing, of course, and I think this is very, very significant, and this has been accelerated by the crisis, that developing countries are in fact becoming the dynamic forces in world trade, and in particular a group of developing countries, with it says the Asian countries dominate. I think you know which one among them. China, followed by India, are the ones that are dominating a very, very significant change in the power relations in the world economy. International experience, as I said, that those countries that have been successful have adopted a strategic approach to the setting of tariffs in particular. Tariff policy, we want to defend an approach in which our tariff policy, the setting of tariffs, is informed by our industrial policy objectives and pursued gradually and selectively to support industrial development. And we want to use our strategic trade policy to shift our pattern away from commodity dependence towards more sophisticated value-added production. Now, we have actually, as a result of the Uruguay round negotiations, where unfortunately South Africa was classified as a developed country because of the arrogance of the apartheid regime and the attitude of other members, the fact that we had very high levels of poverty and inequality was not taken into account. So we actually took the commitments of a developed country, and this meant that we went through a period of rather sharp tariff reductions. Our simple average MFN went down from 15% in 1997 to 8.2% in 2006. We've simplified our tariff, the number of tariff lines is halved. We have about 54% of our lines are duty-free. And then we have a trade development cooperation agreement with the European Union. And we have a protocol with SADC countries, which have meant that with two very important groups of trading partners, the incidence of tariff protection has declined again. So we've had very significant tariff liberalization since the 90s. But what it hasn't done is it hasn't changed our pattern of trade. Our capital and high skills intensive imports have increased. Labor-intensive production has contracted, both import competition from other countries, and that we've tended to reproduce the situation where we are an exporter of primary goods, primary products. That's basically the story. We haven't, as a result of trade liberalization, changed the structural patterns of our economy. Now, what we want to say is, this is just a slide which is telling us where we stand in terms of our presence in dynamic export products. We're 24th among developing countries and 47th overall. Commodity products dominate the top 25 of our export categories. And we're saying that if we just go through another round of tariff liberalization without any purposeful intervention in the economy, we're likely to just perpetuate this trend. And so we're saying we want to bring about these shifts, and that our approach is that tariffs are an instrument of industrial policy, and that changes that we make in the tariff regime need to be carefully calibrated to the specificities of each sector. And therefore, we say we're going to pursue a developmental and strategic approach to tariff setting. And in general, although we're saying we're going to do investigations case by case, in general, we have a number of mature upstream industries that were very capital intensive, the object of industrial policy that afforded that from the apartheid regime. And those are very often industries which produce goods which are inputs into downstream industries. In those cases, we are going to reduce or even remove those tariffs, and we've done that. But then there are downstream industries that are strategic from an employment point of view or value addition perspective. In those cases, we're either going to retain or we're going to in fact increase, and we have done so within the space that's available to us under WTO rules. We will reduce or we will increase or maintain tariffs. And we're saying therefore there's no a priori assumption that we're going to have a high or low tariff policy. We're going to have a tariff policy which is shaped by our industrial development objectives. This is basically it. We're going to insist on maintaining whatever the sort of pressures may be. We're going to insist on maintaining an approach where we have a body in place, in our case, which is called the International Trade Administration Commission, which does investigations on an industry by industry, case by case basis, looks at the evidence and sets tariffs. And if the evidence leads us in the direction that we must increase some tariffs, and we have policy space to do so, we'll do that. But where the evidence leads us to say we need to reduce or remove tariffs, we will do that as well. And that's what we will pursue in our international trade negotiations.